Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming to Piedmont Health Services and Sickle Cell Agency, along with Rare Disease Innovations World Sickle Cell Day event. I would like to pass it to Ms. Kathy Norcott for our welcome.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is a wonderful day that the Lord has made, and we're glad to be in it. Welcome to our roadmap to sickle cell transition on this wonderful day of the World Sickle Cell Day. I am excited about what you're going to learn today. I'm excited about the presenters that you're going to hear from today. I'm just excited, excited, excited. Thank you for being a supporter and a friend of Piedmont Health Services and Sickle Cell Agency. We are still celebrating our 50 years, so look out for some more educational opportunities and awareness opportunities. And I am going to be remiss because I didn't even say who I am. I'm Kathy Norcott, the Executive Director of Piedmont Health Services and Sickle Cell Agency. I would like for you to share this with your family and your friends. Call someone. If they can't get on Facebook, they can go to our YouTube page because the information that we're here to share today is going to make a difference, not just in your life, but in so many other people's lives. We know that sickle cell has been around for a really, really long time. We know that some persons have been fortunate enough to have been to receive a cure for sickle cell, but we still have so many people still being born with sickle cell. We have so many people living with sickle cell, and we want to figure out a way to help our adolescents and our young people to transition into adulthood. Here at the agency, we look at transition not just on a medical realm, but also personally. Any of you that have a adolescent or teenager in your house, you know that you have a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You don't know which way they're going to come this morning from this afternoon. So we're going to try to work out a way to make that transition a lot easier for not just the adolescent living with sickle cell, but also for the family. So I want you to, as I asked you a little earlier, please call someone, share it on your Facebook page, but let's get together as a team and be able to work together to find a cure for sickle cell that's universal for everyone. But at the same time, let's make living better for those who have sickle cell disease. Again, thank you. And I really appreciate all of the panelists, all of the providers, all of the and let me give a special shout out to Keystone Marketing, Kevin Elwood, who works with us and making sure that we have quality services on social media. So thank you, and again, welcome to the roadmap to sickle cell transition World Sickle Cell Day event. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Ms. Kathy. Now I would like to pass it to Mr. Elazio MacArthur, who is the pioneer for beginning what the roadmap to sickle cell transition is. Mr. Elazio, thank you so much for being here this morning. You have to unmute.
Good morning, Justina.
Good morning.
Great, great. Good morning and happy Juneteenth to you all. I'm really excited, as Miss Kathy stated earlier, to be participating in this special World Sickle Cell Day event with you, the roadmap to sickle cell transition. I want to say thank you to Piedmont Health Services and Sickle Cell Agency, the Rare Disease Innovations Institute, and all of the wonderful guest speakers for making this happen on today. Our goal for this day is to be one of encouragement, empowerment, conversation, and representation. So what do we mean when we say the roadmap to sickle cell transition? Well, have you ever used a roadmap? I know some people are probably saying a roadmap. What is that? In this day and age, we use Google Maps and Waze along with other number of electronic apps to help us to get to where we want to go. But what we're talking about today is the concept of the old-fashioned roadmap. The paper map that we use to highlight our trips from beginning to end, from point A to point B. And then if you were really good, you were able to mark the stops in between. So how does that really correlate with sickle cell transition? We want our young people, along with their case managers and their healthcare providers, to begin to map out what their journey from pediatric care to adult care looks like, and then be able to highlight the stops in between. The good thing about using a roadmap is that you start right where you are to get to where it is that you want to go. Your stops won't look like everyone else's. Your roadmap will be different and unique because your journey is different and unique, simply because you are who you are. So I like to think of a roadmap as a form of journaling. This is one way to tell your story about your journey while living and thriving with sickle cell. Your starting point may begin on a great day, or it may begin in the day hospital while receiving care. Some of your stopping points may be the wonderful time you spent at Piedmont Health Services and Sickle Cell Agency Summer Enrichment Camp, or it may be graduation from middle school or high school. Wherever your roadmap begins, just remember it's your story and it's your journey. You get to dictate the starting point and the end point. You also get to choose your stops in between. So again, I'm excited about what's happening now, and I'm even more excited about what's going to continue to happen in the future. Today's event is a great starting point on North Carolina's roadmap to sickle cell transition. Again, I want to thank you, Justina, for allowing me to participate in this event.
Thank you so much, Mr. Elazio. That was a great description of what we are experiencing with the roadmap to sickle cell transition. Now, I would like to begin by introducing our panelists. We will begin with Dr. Little. Dr. Jane Little is a hematologist who takes care of adults with sickle cell disease. She learned sickle cell disease from colleagues at the NIH and mostly from patients in DC and then Cleveland and now North Carolina. Her fun fact is she has trained her cats to do tricks on a trampoline. Next, we have Dr. Alex George, who was born in India and grew up in Nigeria before moving to the United States at 15. He graduated at Ben L. Smith High School in Greensboro and Wake Forest University before moving to Houston, Texas, to complete his PhD in molecular genetic and his medical training. He then completed his residency in pediatric and a fellowship in pediatric hematology and oncology at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. After this training, Dr. George moved back to Houston in 2011 to take the position in the sickle cell program at Texas Children's Hospital in 2011. Dr. George was co-director of the sickle cell program and director of the clinical research at Texas Children's Hospital in 2013 to 2020. He moved to Winston-Salem in 2020, and became the director of the sickle cell program at Barnard's Children's Hospital. Dr. George is committed to learning from patients and families about how medical professionals can help with improving the quality of life and interactions with the medical system. He is also interested in learning about patients and their families and new treatment options to becoming available and how the treatments can be adopted to individuals' patient circumstances. Dr. George's fun fact is he is an avid tennis player and he wishes that his children would play too, but they prefer soccer. And did you know that Joe Wilfred Tosa is a professional French tennis player who has ranked number 5 in the world for tennis, and he has a form of sickle cell disease. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Ife Osankwo. Dr. Ife Osankwo is a professor of medicine and pediatric at Atrium Health and the director of the Sickle Cell Disease Enterprise at Levine Cancer Institute and Atrium Health in Charlotte, North Carolina. Dr. Iffy has 30 years of experience with sickle cell disease and hematology. She earned her MD from the University of Nigeria and from John Hopkins University in maternal and children health, with the goal of using the medical and public health expertise to enhance access to care for populations of underrepresented patients rather than just a few. Dr. Iffy is a seasoned researcher who believes in engaging in the community and equal partners in the quest to improve their care. Her team has established a national model for transition from pediatric to adult care for young adults with sickle cell disease, leveraging peer mentor and engagement for community-based organizations as equal stakeholders during her tenure as faculty at Emory University, publishing a guidebook for Georgia Department of Public Health. She is the PI for a $9.8 million PCORI funded Step Up Transition study evaluating the comparative effectiveness of structured education based transitioning program with and without peer mentoring to improve acute care utilizing for sickle cell disease and the lead of 3 MPIs, and a $4.3 million HRSA funded sickle cell disease treatment project titled Embrace, Educating and Mentoring to Bearing Access to Care. Dr. Iffy's fun fact is that she loves stilettos in red, orange, and bright pink, and she also loves goat meat. I understand. Goat meat is really good. Lastly, we have Dr. Sarah Leonard. She just joined the ECU Pediatric Hematology and Oncology about 6 years ago. She is currently assistant professor in the Department of Pediatrics. She received her undergraduate and medical degree as well as her master's in public health from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. After completing her pediatric residency and chief year at the Medical Center in Greenville, she pursued her hematology and oncology fellowship at Duke University. After fellowship, she was happy to return to Eastern North Carolina to join the pediatric faculty at ECU, where she is the clinical practice, including taking care of inpatient and outpatient pediatric hematology and oncology patients. Her research and clinical interests include sickle cell and transition of care for adolescents and young adults. Dr. Leonard is also the program director for the pediatric residency program and enjoys working with residents in a variety of clinical, service, and advocacy research efforts. Her hobbies include having outdoor adventures with her husband and 3 small children. Her favorite travel destination includes national and state parks, especially the lighthouses in the Outer Banks. Thank you so much for being a part of this panel. And I would like to introduce all of our patient panelists. We have Miss Nerva. We also have Dominique and Mr. Jerry Lee. I would also like to introduce to you Ms. Tara Britt, a part of the Rare Disease Innovations. Thank you all so much for being a part of this. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for letting me back in.
Good morning, Christina.
Good morning. I would like to start off by saying thank you again. This is going to be a discussion, an open discussion about transition and how we can, where the roadmap is now, where it has been in the past, and where it will go in the future. Okay, so I will start off with our first question, our panel discussion. What is your definition of transition? And this is posed to a patient and a doctor.
I think you're going to have to name names.
Okay, no problem. I would like to start with Nerva. What is your definition of transition?
To move on to the next thing in life, to change one state to another. So to change from childhood to adulthood for care.
Okay, great. All right, Dr. Iffy, what is your definition of transition?
I liken transition to growth and excitement. Like Nerva said, something new, something different. And it doesn't only have to be from pediatrics to adult care. I'm transitioning with my husband from being, caregivers for teenagers to empty nesters in the next 4 years. Yes. I can't wait.
Okay. Yes. Go
ahead, Justine.
Thank you, Tara.
Okay, I'd like to pose this question to a patient. So, Jerry, I'm going to kick this over to you. Why do you think it is important for people with sickle cell to transition?
I think it's important just because the transition from childhood care to adult care, you kind of can be more hands-on as far as like the care in general. You're able to ask those questions and be more in charge of your health. So I think it's more important to be able to be in those doctor's visits by yourself, or like without your parents. Not saying that your parents can't be there, but they kind of like to shadow and tend to kind of handle all the business pertaining to you when you have sickle cell too, especially like during that transition stage. Like the parents like to kind of be the forefront for the child instead of letting the child actually speak for themselves. So I think it's really important to leading up to the transition, you basically just ask those questions that you really want to ask and want to know about your healthcare itself. And then when you get to the adult care, that you're not afraid to ask the questions that's really important that you want to know the answers to. So
can I intervene? But who gives those pointers, those notes to a child that's like 18, just finding themselves transitioning into adulthood, and they don't know how to speak for themselves? Who gives that? Like, we don't even have a program set up for that at all.
I feel like for me personally, I feel like with the parents itself too, they need to, kind of be working with their child to be able to ask those questions when they go to the doctor that they want to know the answers to, because it all starts with, with the one-on-one help with them. So they're not afraid to ask those questions once they get into the doctor's office too, because half of the time, sickle cell patients just kind of go with everything what the doctor tells them instead of asking questions. So it kind of leads up to, I think it's like a prep work. Like anything you do and study for is prep involved in anything that you do. So the main thing is kind of, get them out of their shell and not being afraid to ask those questions that they want to know the answers to, because at the end of the day, if you don't ask, you won't never know. So
Can I answer your question also, Nerva?
Go ahead.
So I think one of the challenges that we figured out about maybe 10 years ago is that you're right. There is no process or plan or structure or roadmap, right? We just kind of flow. You grow up and then you move on. And there isn't anybody who is assigned that responsibility to help that child go through the different stages of change required to become an adaptive adult. And so part of the work we're doing with transition right now is to come up with a national model for that. And we're learning from you guys, the patients, we're learning from the community-based organization, we're learning from the providers. What are all the pieces that need to be part of this process, and who's responsible for what? So the Step Up study, shameless plug, is designed to create that model so that when you turn, I don't know, 12, 13, there's a plan for you. 15, 16, there's a plan for you. 17, 18, 19, and then even up until 25, 26. But it requires this kind of dialogue. So you guys tell us, this is what I think I need. People who are like 30 say, when I was 25 or 20, I would have loved to have this. We look at the science and the research, and then we come up with the standard. But you're absolutely right, Nerva. There has not been. And one of the goals of Step Up is to create that standard and assign who's going to do what for who at what point in their journey of transition. That's a very good point.
May I say something briefly?
Yes.
I love what people have been saying, both patient and provider, because I remember when I started out in this business, I would go to transition graduations, which some of you may have participated in, and I thought it was a wake. I mean, everybody in the room looked like, they're handing out cake and no one looked happy. Like there was not that feeling of growth and that feeling of progress. I think there was a lot of fear from the parents, from the kids, from the providers. And I think there's just been a lot more identification in the last 10 years, in part from work that people on this board have been doing to try to really address that transition. And I personally feel like it's a transition that starts at about 12 and goes to about 30. Like, I don't feel like you're done when they're 19 and they make it to their appointment. So I think there's going to be a lot of progress in the next 10 years if we all just keep butting our heads against this problem. Because those graduation parties are just, it should be a party every year. It shouldn't be you feel like you've ended something. It's really an evolution. So I'm really happy that we're talking about it, because I think it's going to be an important area for us all in the next decade.
Yes, I totally and honestly and completely agree. And so for our next question, we have, at what age do hematologists suggest beginning to plan and discuss patients' transition from pediatric to adult care with their family and anyone else who is involved in that patient's care? What age or when do you plan, or have you been planning to start with talking about transition? And so I would like to pose that question to Dr. Alex George. You have to unmute.
Yeah, I was working on that. Sorry, the buttons are different plates. Yeah, so that is an important question. And the basic answer would be that it's never too early to start. I think you have to introduce the idea to your patients up front that at some point you are going to have to switch over from being in pediatric care to adult care, and at least have the patient and family have a heads up on that. The formal program that I take part in, we have a roadmap we follow for our patients as to what has to be done at each age, including immunizations and other care. And basically at about age 13, the 13th birthday or the 13th birthday visit is when we recommend starting the discussion about transition, the fact that the child will eventually have to switch over to adult care, and also discussing the different domains, the different skills and knowledge that the child will have to effectively work in the adult setting.
Thank you. Dominique, would you like to chime in on what you think is a good age to begin talking about transition? I'm sorry, Dominique, we can't hear you. Okay, unmute. I think we're having technical difficulties. Okay, we'll come back to the patient answer.
Okay, you want to move?
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. So the next question, we need we're going to look at this from a doctor and a patient perspective. what is the difference between pediatrics and adult healthcare? So I'm going to first ask Nerva, what's your idea about that?
Thanks. With pediatric care, doctors take the time to listen. The patient is a patient. The patient is, they matter. They empathize. They have empathy with the kids, and nobody wants to see a kid screaming for 6 hours or 2 hours. So as soon as a kid comes in, when I was a kid, especially being with sickle cell and being in the hospital, I know as soon as I walked in and I'm screaming in pain, the first thing they would be like, "Oh, put her in the back. Like, don't even let her parents sign in. Just put her in the back, and we'll handle her." Like, you know. And as adults, it's, "Oh, okay, well, you're sick. Oh, okay, well, go sit down." Then when we get to the back, it's, "So what are you here for? Sickle cell. What's your pain from 1 to 10? It's a 6 or 7." And then they go, "Oh, well, I don't understand how you're in so much pain, but you're holding a conversation with whoever you walked in with." And then it's like everything that I say falls on deaf ears. No matter how much pain I'm in, how much I'm crying, everything that I say falls on deaf ears. They don't care. And then the next line is, "Oh, you're here for drugs. Yep, you're here for drugs. And I don't feel comfortable giving you your regimen, even though you know your regimen. I refuse to give you what you are taking at home. So I'm going to give you less than what you're taking at home. So now you're there uncomfortable." And my main line is, if I'm coming to the hospital and I'm not comfortable, I might as well have stayed home and been uncomfortable. Like, what is the purpose of me coming to the hospital? And it's sad, but I don't go to the hospital until my fever is like 110, 115. And the paramedics come and they're like, "Why'd you wait so long?" And then when I get to the ER and I can barely stand up on my own, or I could barely talk, or I could barely move, or I could barely physically or capably even make a sentence or be coherent enough, they're like, "Why'd you wait so long? Because you're really sick now. Now you need like 10 transfusions, and you need antibiotics, and you need a blood this." But if I would have came when I was some semi sick, you would have told me I was seeking drugs, or you would have told me that I wasn't really sick because I'm not screaming and yelling like a 10-year-old, because I'm now 30 something. So now I know how to compose myself with the pain that is ridiculous. So I know how to like balance that out. But you would have said, "I'm here for drugs," and I can't tell you as a doctor that's because I've had doctors tell me, "Oh, I'm God. Do you not understand that I'm God? Like, you can't tell me how to do my job because you didn't go to medical school with me. So I'm not giving you the dose that you're telling me to give you. I don't feel comfortable. I feel like you're here for drugs." But if I was here for drugs, I could have stayed home because you're giving me less than what I'm prescribed at home. Like, I could have stayed home then. So it's just like when you get to the adult services, you don't matter. No matter what you say, how much pain you're in, and if you tell them that you can't walk to the bathroom, it's, "Oh, you're wasting my time. So either you walk to the bathroom or you go home." "Okay, I'll go home and I'll get sicker at home. And then when I'm when I'm on my deathbed, I'll come back because then maybe you'll pay me some type of attention and treat me like a human being." But I was fortunate now to have a doctor, Dr. Little, as my doctor. And she cares and she listens, so I'm lucky on that aspect. But everybody doesn't have a Dr. Little. Everybody doesn't have someone who cares. Everybody doesn't have a doctor that's going to take the time out and you can call their clinic for them to advocate for you in the hospital. So that's the difference between adult care. Well, as a child, they listen. Once you get an adult, it's like, "Nah, you're here for drugs. You're not important. That's all you're here for, is to get a high." And it's like, I'm not getting a high because I've been on this medication all my life. There's nothing it's doing but giving me an ease with the pain that I'm in. So that's the two differences when it comes to adult care and when it comes to the children.
Thank you for that. Powerful.
Yes.
So let me. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was going
I
to, I
was
guess,
going to
speak.
say
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay.
yes.
She definitely hit it right on the head. I'm going through that, I guess now. I'm 27 now. And me personally, I'll try to stay out of the hospital as much as possible. But I'm kind of like her. Like I want to be like not want to be, but I choose to wait until like I absolutely can't take it anymore, or like I'm like literally close to just like okay now I have to go because every time I go, I have the issue with them not believing me. As in they think the same thing that you only here for drugs. And they give me like Tylenol and stuff like that that I already have at the house. And it's frustrating me because I remember as a child that as soon as if I had some pain or any issues, my mom was like, "Let's go." They go and take care of me and they listen. Now as an adult, it's this like they think I want drugs. They think I'm there wasting their time, and I'm like, no, I'm not wasting your time. I wouldn't be here to pay all this money to you to waste time. I'm not here to waste time. I need for you to cure me. And I literally had a doctor literally discharge me. And I've told him like, hey, everything you're giving me, is not working. I need something stronger. And they're like, well, I can't really give you anything stronger. I'm like, yes, you can. And so I asked to speak to the head, someone that's over him. And he told me, nope, I can't do that. And then came back like 5 minutes later with discharge papers and said, have a nice day. I'm like, ugh. But unfortunately, I don't feel like I had any like support, because I really didn't have anybody to like kind of be my advocate, because I don't know doctor terms and nothing. All I know is I'm in pain. And I know for me, I wish that now that I can, I guess, kind of have like a person that I can just tell what I'm going through and they understand and can communicate from me to the doctor. So that way, they can kind of understand the severity of what I'll be going through.
Thanks, Dominique. Thanks for your perspective on that. And Dr. Little, I'd like to hand the wand over to you from your perspective on this.
Hi, Dr. Little.
Thank you. You're very kind to me, Nora.
You're welcome.
It's sickening to hear these stories. And I think for me, the visual indication of that is I remember going where the children got their blood drawn and there'd be like little fishes on the ceiling and the chairs were giant teddy bears. And like, it just was the most loving and supportive environment. And then, one day over 18 and all of a sudden you're in a hard plastic chair with no one really paying attention. I think from my perspective, the way to try to address that is really two ways. One is to keep asking patients. I don't always remember to do this, but I want them to tell us when something bad happens so that we can try to go back to the people who are not understanding this disease and really reorient them, because it's just not right. It's not appropriate. It's not good medicine. And the second thing is that I think, especially in a place like North Carolina, where so many people are far away from great centers like Charlotte, ECU, Duke, UNC, that I think we really have to get better. And COVID may help us in this at helping people remotely, so that patients who are followed in a sickle cell center can have a care plan that can be available to them down the coast. And they're not all by themselves without anyone behind them in an ED saying, yeah, you can give them that amount of payment. It'll be okay. It's safe. Just do it. So I think those, for me, are the two things: trying to get more feedback to providers who are doing a bad job and trying to get more support for patients who are, when they're seen remotely. Yes. And somebody just sent a note saying the mental health effects. We were part of a PCORI study, and it was pretty clear, and it was more true for men than women, but I think it was true for everybody, that they were exhausted by this process of running up against the healthcare system. I think it really can deplete people and make them sad and angry and feel crummy.
Thank you. Thanks for that. The next question I'd like to pose to a parent, and is, as a parent, how are you planning to let go of managing your child's health care?
I'm a parent, but my kids don't have sickle cell, so I'm good on that one. But my mom, how she let go is that she had to. I went to college. I went away. So it was up to me to figure it out. And before I had Dr. Little, I had a awesome oncologist slash hematologist. He was more of an oncologist, but he worked with hemo because it's a little town in Fayetteville. But he was awesome. Because there's stages, and that's another thing. A lot of doctors don't realize that there are stages that people with sicknesses go through. Like when you get to like your 20s or your early, like 18 to 20 or 18 to 19, I mean 18 to 27, 28, there's a stage of you being in denial. Like, yes, I have this sickness, but I'm 20, so I'm gonna live life the way that everybody else live life. And it's not that you're trying to be it's reckless. It is reckless, but it's a stage that you go through in life. That same state, like you're out on your own. You're trying to learn yourself. You're trying to become an adult. With those different stages, you treat your body like you're invincible, especially when you're younger. Like, oh, I have sickle cell, but I can still hang out and party and do all this extra stuff that everybody else is doing, knowing that you can't. You do it anyway. And it's like it's just mental stages to the whole situation. And then when you go through those stages, you're like destroying your body. Like it's going bad. It's your blood levels are low. You're dehydrated half the time. And I went to my doctor's appointment, and he really like got in on me. He was like, you know what? If you're gonna waste my time, if you're gonna sit here and not care about your body and not care about the fact that you have sickle cell, then you don't need to come back to my office, because I can't see you die at 20 something years old and you were in my care. So either you're going to take this serious or you're not. But it was out of a place of concern. I can take that. What I can't take is doctors that don't that act like they're concerned, but they don't care if you live or die, like under their care. Like it's like, whatever, I still get paid. It's not my issue. And I don't know if she's telling the truth anyway. So it's just different stages in life where you have to realize that you are sick and you need to figure it out. Like figure out, are you going to live to see 80 or are you going to die at 30?
I absolutely agree with Nirva. And I do want to point out that it's not just sickle cell. All of us, if we are really honest with ourselves, I remember when I was 21. Mm-hmm. I did some things, right, that I probably shouldn't have done. And I took some risks that I probably shouldn't have taken. And I didn't follow up with my asthma doctor like I should have. And I think part of what needs to happen is that we shouldn't treat sickle cell as if there's something wrong with the 25-year-old who's acting like a 25-year-old just because they have sickle cell disease. And healthcare needs to understand that a 22, 23, 24-year-old goes through those stages that we never talked about. And we need to be taught as providers how to handle or how to work with a teenager, a young adult who is going through those changes. I have teenage kids, in their 20s and one teenager, and it was an experience raising them. They did the same thing my young adult patients do. Don't take their medicine, don't go for their appointment, roll their eyes when I give them advice, don't like to drink water, eat a whole bunch of junk. They do the same things. And so I think healthcare, sometimes we blame the disease and the person with the disease and forget that this is part of normal human development. So Dr. George mentioned the checklist that they have, right, that we use for transition. When you're 2 years old, there's a vaccine you got to get. When you're 5, you got to get ready for preschool. When you're 13, menstrual cycle and things like that. Every adult, we know what normal development should look like. And we need to treat sickle cell just like we would treat anybody else, whether you have a chronic disease or not, in understanding that this is how it plays out in sickle cell when they're going through that adjustment, that trying to figure themselves out between 18 and 25 or 26. I think we have to learn more as providers about what that means. I'm a pediatric doctor, and we learn about growth and development as part of pediatrics. As an adult provider now, I notice that I pull a lot on my pediatric training in that area of growth and development. But there's not a whole lot of comfort amongst my colleagues who are adult doctors in understanding that, because they get people who are supposed to be fully grown. But fully grown happens over time, and not every 18-year-old is 18 in their development. Not every 30-year-old is 30 in their development. And then you add in the stroke issue, low oxygen levels, low hemoglobin levels. Everybody grows up at a different rate. And so I think that's part of what needs to happen. I agree with the telemedicine piece that Dr. Little mentioned, but I also think that as providers, we need to do a little bit more understanding of growth and development and such stages of life, like Trevor mentioned, to kind of help guide us in how we take care of our young adults with sickle cell disease during transition.
Thank you so much for your perspectives. This is really, really informative, and I'm excited to be on this journey with you all. The next question that I have is, as a patient becomes of age for transition, what legal changes in health care do they need to know about? And I would like to start with Dr. Leonard.
There we go. Hey, good morning, everybody. So I've really enjoyed, I just want to say, everybody's comments so far. This has just been absolutely fantastic and enlightening for me. I think as a pediatric provider, I think one comment that somebody said earlier is just kind of hearing stories, especially after the transition to adulthood, is so important for me as we try to prepare our pediatric patients for that. So as far as legal changes, turning 18, even though the transition that we're talking about is a bit of a process, in the legal world, turning 18 is like flipping a switch, and so many things happen, whether you're ready for them or not, as far as, being able to vote, and you're, able to consent. So a lot of things involve consenting in medicine, and being of legal age to consent all of a sudden kind of is one change that we try to prepare people for. Also, your insurance is a major change. And having to navigate that process. So I think that's another major one. It's just the process of transitioning your insurance to under yourself, where you've been under your parents and you haven't had to think about those things anymore. So those are a couple of the things that we start talking about. I don't know if there's others that other people may add, but those are the main ones that we focus on. I think health insurance is the major one.
I think Dr. Little will tell you that it's also who do you communicate with as from a provider to a patient, right? I can't no longer call up Dominique's mama and say, hey, Dominique didn't come for his appointment. Is he taking his medication? What's going on with him? I have to call Dominique, and if he don't answer the phone, that's it.
That's true. That's huge. And that kind of relates to the question where we were talking about how parents relinquish control. Because when all of a sudden I'm, calling the patients with their lab results, sometimes the parents were like, well, I want to know the lab results. So I think you're right. That's a huge discussion that is sometimes difficult to navigate that part of the transition.
And I do think we have to start getting better at talking to parents. And I'm sure you guys are, actually. I think I'm always behind on this stuff. But when the kids are 12, 13, 14, telling the parents, listen, get ready, because there's some things we just can no longer do when you step over the threshold of 18. Because it's very distressing, and they're transitioning too. I mean, it's a big deal. And I think we need to prepare the whole family, the whole community, for what's happening to the child stepping over to adult care.
Yeah. Along those lines, one thing that we try to do in pediatrics is, starting at about 11, 12, ask the parents to step out during some point of their visit. I know, like, what do I have to leave if they can say everything in front of me that they need to say? But we do it anyway. We're like, well, we understand that, but this is part of, empowering the child to start asking their own questions and take care of their own health. And sometimes it's really hard to get the parent out of the room, but we start doing that early. And I think it gives the kids some power, and then starts lengthening that tie between the parent and the child.
But I got to tell you, as a parent, it is traumatizing. So I've done this now 3 times. My 22-year-old, the first time I was at the door, like, to find out what they were talking about. And then they said, oh, I can't send a message for her in my chart. She has to be the one to send the message. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. I pay for this insurance. It's my money. And now I'm doing it the 3rd time. It's unsettling for a parent. And I think we have to appreciate that for the parents, they're afraid. They're afraid that, Jerry's going to do something stupid and then end up not making it, or that Nerva's going to make a mistake or they won't know what to ask, and then something is going to be missed. They have a lot of fear and anxiety. And our job as providers is to help allay the parents' fear and anxiety. So what my pediatrician does is that when they're done with the visit, she will tell me what she can tell me to close that gap, but she will not tell me the stuff that my daughter doesn't want her to tell me. Now, I try to bribe my daughter after the visit, like, what'd you say? What'd you say? but that's one way we can help allay their anxiety about the fact that, he's doing really good, that Jerry's, he got it together. He's on point with this and this and that. Or if there's something that they can work on, Jerry needs a little bit more work with remembering all his medications, but you don't want the parent to now nag the child to death, because the next time they're not going to say nothing. So it's a really fine line where you provide information to the parent, but not too much information, but also allow the child or the young adult to take more ownership of what's going on with them.
Yes, those perspectives.
What do you think?
Perspectives.
Oh, I agree. Just 100%. Just because it gets hard. It really gets hard, especially like changing from that pediatric to adulthood. So just with everything, and just talking about sickle cell too is kind of hard, especially like when you were younger too, because you're trying to be normal as all your friends are too. So just trying to find that balance is the key, I feel, in all of it, because it's just going to continue to get harder and harder as you go. So
yes, thank you for those perspectives. You all kind of touched on our next question, which is, how do you encourage a child to become more in charge of their own health care? Now, that was posed to a parent, but since we do have parents on this call, I think that you all's perspectives were awesome on how to begin talking to a child about their health care from a little tiny age all the way up until they're becoming an adult, and making sure that they realize the big changes that are coming, and not necessarily holding on too tight to their hand, but just guiding them to the next stage. Tara, would you like to go to the next question?
I would. Thanks, Justina. So we're going to get a clinician's perspective. And Dr. George, I'm going to ask you, how do you improve healthcare transition for others?
Right. So again, transition is a huge issue and a really complicated one. And I don't think that it happens very well consistently. And so I think the biggest thing to help transition for others is to raise awareness about this as a really important issue in a child's care, and to make it clear to the family that in addition to all the things we do for our sickle cell patients, immunizations, checking blood counts, hydroxyurea, all of those things, that this preparation for transition is something to be taken seriously. It's not something to talk about at the end of the visit in the last couple of minutes and say, okay, remember that at 18, you're switching over to adult care. So raising the awareness and then following a structure and making sure that you, the family, the child, other people involved in the child's care are all aware of the structure of learning about sickle cell disease, learning about your medications, learning what your symptoms are when your disease is getting worse, things of that nature, is helpful in making this progression. So really following a structure, making sure that you are aware of the structure and the family is aware of the structure is where I would start with this.
Thank you. And you touched a little bit on our next question. How do you prepare patients or yourself for transition? Jerry, would you like to start off with you?
Oh yeah, that's fine. For me, my transition was it was difficult too, because as a kid you go to the same doctor forever until you get to 18, then it's time for you to change. But the main thing I would say is you need to really learn about your particular sickle cell, what you have, what's good for you and what's not good for you, because a lot of people really, when you transition to the adulthood and go to different doctors, is kind of, I've been getting treatment as far as like sickle cell is. All sickle cell, basically, they try to treat each patient the same way. And I've had conversations with doctors and tell them like, you can't really treat me the same way that you would treat another patient too, because I may be on top of my sickle cell more so than anybody else or anybody that I know personally. So that's the main thing, because you do get treated as you just want medication all the time when you go to the doctors. So I feel like sometimes those talks need to be important. I feel like the transition needs to happen like at all the pediatric doctor's appointments, as far as like from 13 until 18, to kind of lead them up to that transition to make it easier for them, kind of talking about it all the time, as far as like, what helps them, what doesn't help them, what type of sickle cell they have, just instilling everything that they need to know as far as like when they get to adulthood, especially like when you go off to college or you go off to school and you're not in the same area and you getting new doctors, and it's harder. It's really harder being 18 and you don't really know what type of sickle cell you have, or you never really asked the questions that you needed to ask to know what you need to do when you go to a new doctor, because it's hard because that doctor hasn't treated you before, so they really don't know you. They just kind of read off a paper, and some doctors don't even, look at your file sometimes when you go to the emergency room. I had emergency room doctors before to try to give me Tylenol and I before. So add a leave and stuff that, stuff that you don't really need and you can't take. And it's difficult. It's difficult. It makes you not even want to go. And especially when you're at that age when you're trying to just be with your friends, you're trying to hang out, you're trying to do 18-year-old things. You're not really worried about your sickle cell as much until you get sick. So it's a difficult transition, which needs to be, spoke about a lot more than what it is, because it tends to kind of lead you away from not coming to the doctors as much as you need to, not taking your medicine as much as you need to, not checking in as much as you need to do so. It's to have a long-term effect on the patient.
Can I ask a question to the patients? Do you think that your pediatric providers and your adult providers needed help with transition
Yes.
Absolutely.
themselves? What do
Yes.
you mean by why do you say that, Dominique?
Because I know from my situation, I had one doctor. Well, my doctor in my teenage years, was pretty good. My regular family doctor, if I needed something, of course, my mom being there, was very good. It was very supportive. So if I had something, it was no issue. Once I become 18 and I got like my own insurance and everything, I had to switch doctors. So I had a doctor who knew me that had no issue, helping me, treating me the way I needed to. So a completely new doctor who's trying to experiment on me. So piggybacking on what Jerry said, it's tough because when you're 18, 19, or going through that transitional stage, I know especially me, I was in college. Not only was I in college, I went to two colleges and also was able to march in the band at A&T. So I went from you just doing normal high school physical band stuff to like going to like a collegiate band, which is like military style as far as like calisthenics and all those things. So the way I treated my body, my body took a lot of hardship, so to speak, because I was a lot of physically demanding. And I wish on my end that my doctor who knew me from my childhood, could have been there to kind of, okay, Dom, this is what you need to do. Okay, you can do this, but I don't recommend you doing this. Or if you do this, let me know how you feel. Because my doctor, when I had in college, I would tell him things I'm going through, and again, you don't really take yourself like you're supposed to because you're trying to fit in, and you don't want to be a burden on everyone. But I know with my doctor as a teenager, not as a teenager, but as I got 18 and older, it was just that trial and error. So when I'm going through things, if I had a football game or not feeling good at practice, and my body's going through different things, I'll try to, I'll let them know. And again, it's just like they're trying to give me simple stuff that I can already take at the house. Or if I'm going over the issue, meanwhile, I'm trying not to miss class, trying to make sure I make performances and practices. And it's like, okay, I hear what you're saying, Doc, but what you're telling me is not working. Can you listen to me and can you address the issue that I'm having? This is my issue. The remedy that you gave me for is not working. Can you please help me? And it was just that fighting back and forth, listening, not listening. And so kind of going with Jerry said, it's like, why even tell you? So I know I had an issue where I missed the game because my sickle cell was acting all crazy. I wasn't getting any sleep. And it forced me to go to the hospital. And by that time, if I would have felt more comfortable in my case to go there before, when I started having the symptoms of feeling bad, it wouldn't have got as bad as it did. But of course, that stemmed from me when I went to my doctor from the start. Them not listening to me from the start. So I think just definitely getting a doctor that understands. And I think if you can kind of prepare between the parent and the doctor, if you have the same doctor from a child to an adult, great, you're blessed. But if you are going to have a new doctor, if you can kind of introduce, kind of start that early, so try to get to know them. I think that transition once you leave from high school going into college and adulthood, I think it'll be a little bit better because you've had someone to kind of understand you a little bit more and don't, kind of treat you as an experiment or, yeah.
That's very helpful. Nerva, what are your thoughts?
On what Dominique said, or the question in general?
The question in general. So what do you think the doctors need in terms of getting both pediatric and adult? Do they need help with transition? Because, we're talking about you guys are the ones transitioning, but
Right.
maybe we are transitioning too, because I have to give up my handsome young boy that I've taken care of for 15 years and he's about to leave and go somewhere else. And then the other guy who's going to get you, I don't know if I trust him, right? And then the new doctor is like, I don't know this patient, how do I do this? What help do you think we need as providers, both on the pediatric side and on the adult side?
I think that I really do think some doctors, how you guys have to go back and do a yearly class or school to keep your licenses up and updated, or get a certain type of training for a certain type of license or a certain type of something for that hospital at that time.
Yep.
I do think that oncology and hematology doctors should go for a weekend or something and have patients with sickle cell, lupus, or whatever disease it is that affects certain people more than others, to actually listen to the patients. Because when you have the stories and they see how they are reacting to us, maybe then they have the empathy and the patience to understand that whatever you were told by your physician in whatever year you graduated is not factual. Because I know that my cousin is a doctor, and he said, when he was going to med school, it was a 30-minute conversation. Sickle cell is this, blah, 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 blah. That's it. And then when he got training, it was more of a older doctor saying, yeah, they're drug seekers. You just, some of them just come here for drugs and you don't need to pay attention to them most. That's what a older that he's doing his residency is telling him. But he knows that he has a cousin that has sickle cell, and it's like, nah, that's not her fight. So it's you need some type of training. I feel if it's not a training, but just listening to different sickle cell warriors and their story to understand why we come in defensive. Sometimes it's not even being defensive. It's just that we come in trying to protect ourselves because we know you're going to say something to trigger the back and forth. We just know it's coming. And then some doctors go as far as soon as they walk in, you need to turn off your cell phone and put it away. Why do I need to put my cell phone? Because you're about to say something wrong, and this is the day of recording, and you don't want to be caught. Because I'm good. I'm very good for putting you on blast and the hospital on social media. And you can ask a lot of my sorors and a lot of my friends, and people will call the hospital 200-300 times, and they're like, yo, how many brothers and sisters do you have? 200. 200, because then it puts the conversation in. Now the CEO is going to come from upstairs because he or she doesn't want the hospital to look like a negative flight. And I've realized, oh, that works. Now I'm not going to sit here for 6 hours. I'm going to tag your hospital, and I'm going to tag the doctor that's doing whatever he's doing. And then what I don't like also is when doctors tell you, no, you can't switch your doctor. Excuse you? I don't want you on my care team. I don't want you on my team anymore. Oh, well, it's either me or no one. So all that needs the bedside etiquette that doctors don't have. Half of the doctors really don't have. They're book smart, but don't know how to speak to people. That's a training within itself. And then After that training, you need a training on how to deal with certain sicknesses. And don't think that because somebody told you that one person was here for drug seeking. And am I going to say that every sickle cell patient is innocent and we come because of this? I'm not going to say that, because I know there's some people that use the system. I'm not going to lie. But just because we have a few bad apples, which is bad apples in everything, don't make 3,000 of us drug seekers. Like, it's not fair.
Absolutely.
And then another thing is, I realized that hospitals that are like the hospital of the world, like let's say like your UNCs, your Dukes and stuff, they have this like complexity in their head that, oh, I'm God. Like the doctors there literally think they're like God, or they're better, like they're human to like a 20th power, like they're just like amazing. Like you can't tell them anything. And that's another thing, like like research hospitals or hospitals that's like no one for this or number two for this, and John, like, you know, that just different hospitals, you get different type of doctors, and it's the ego trip. Take the ego out of yourself, listen to the patient, and just understand that we're human just like you're human. And my favorite line to doctors are, if I was your daughter, would you let me sit here for 6 hours screaming in pain? You would not. So don't do it. You won't do it to your child, and you don't want another doctor to do it to your child. Don't do it to me.
So if I could chime in for a minute and just add on to what you've said. You mentioned about being able to switch your doctor if you need to. And that's, I think, a key point. You know, often when parents are ready to have children and looking for a doctor, what's recommended is that you go out and actually interview different pediatricians' office and see how they approach the care of their child, and find someone who matches up with your values and what's important to you. And I think that's also an important part of transition. You know, however good a doctor you are, you're not the right doctor for every patient. You may not fit with their needs. You may not fit with their personalities. And it's important to keep that in mind. And so,
I'm sorry.
Go on.
But what happens when a doctor tells you you can't switch? You're stuck with me.
You simply
Because
say,
I had doctors say that to me.
Yeah, well, you tell them that, you know, that's wrong. You're incorrect, and I can switch because I'm responsible for my care. And finding a good doctor who fits your needs is your right.
It is my right. But
absolutely.
Dr. Alex, I'm going to be real with you. They'll discharge you. They'll put in a paper. And you know, another thing that doctors have power over, which I cannot and I do not appreciate, is that if me and him get into something, he'll go on my chart and write me up as like the worst person in the world. Like I am just nasty, belligerent. I can't get along. There's no other doctor that can get along with me. Do not waste your time on this patient. All these negativity things, because me and you could not see eye to eye. That is unfair, because I don't have the opportunity to go into my chart to see what you wrote about me. Another doctor can. And then that other doctor looks at the chart like, I'm not dealing with her. So then that leaves you stuck with the doctor that you didn't want in the first place. Right. Do you see how we get treated bad in two double negative? We asked for another doctor. You said we couldn't get one. Then you put in our chart that I'm the worst person in the planet right now, and I can't even be talked to. I'm belligerent. I'm this, I'm that. So then when I'm asking for another doctor, what doctor's going to touch me if he just wrote that in my chart? No one is going to deal with that, because they're going to think it's true. And the doctors are never going to make themselves sound like, oh, well, I did tell her I was God, and that's why she responded that way. Because for every action, there's a reaction. You disrespect me, there's going to be a reaction of disrespect too. But you're not going to tell them how you disrespected me. You're just going to tell them that this is how I started, this is how she is, and now I'm stuck with all the negativity, and that's not fair to me. It's not fair to the other patients, and other patients have been through this. It's just like, hold on, wait a minute, that's not fair, because now I have two things against me, and now I can't get another doctor. So then they'll discharge you, and your problem's not solved.
Right. No, you're correct about that. The unfortunate thing is that the Dr. Osunkwo's of the world are relatively rare. And they're adult side doctors who are compassionate and care about people with sickle cell disease. And often you have to search pretty hard to find someone who will work with you. But it is important to do that search. And, I'd say the most important step in transition globally or in a holistic sense is finding a doctor you trust and a doctor you can work with. And that search is worthwhile. It is hard,
It's hard.
especially in sickle cell disease, because not so many adult doctors focus on sickle cell disease. But that is probably the most important thing, even if it's not a sickle cell doctor, even if it's just a general medicine doctor. Someone who listens to you, someone whom you can trust, someone who's going to fit in with you and can be an advocate for you in the medical system. Because, again, this is unfortunate, but we doctors will take the word of a doctor, like you said, a little more seriously than the word of a patient, which is not correct, but that's unfortunately the way things are. And if you have a doctor who's willing to be your advocate in the system, and it doesn't have to be a sickle cell doctor, just a doctor who is caring for you and can be an advocate for you, that will go a long way to fixing the problems anyone has with the sickle cell, with the medical system.
May I just add, thank God you tolerate me, Nerva.
Well, no, Dr.
It's in the mail.
You've been great. You've been great to me. Like when I was there, and the way that you took me in at a like unnormal
No, you don't
circumstances.
I'm just really happy.
I have to,
you've been good.
piggyback off of Dr. Iffy. Dr. Matthews was when I met Dr. Matthews, she came in, she basically had a plan for me, especially like what she wanted to do as far as like what my health pertains, and the things that she had aligned for us to make happen, what she wanted to do, the test she wanted to run, just everything in general as far as like my sickle cell. She read my chart, she helped me understand. So it made my transition to a new place in a new area even better because she was there. We clashed a lot, and we did, but it's because I asked a lot of questions. It's because I'm not opposed to, having some defense when it comes to my health situation. So, and not saying that every patient is just like me, because some patients don't ask questions. But for me personally, I want to know. I want to know what this is. I want to know why you draw my blood. I want to know what test you're running with my blood. I want to know why I have to pee in a cup. I want to know what test you're running for that. Like, I ask these questions. I want to know everything that you're doing and poking and sticking. I want to know those reasons. And Dr. Matthews really made it clear for me to understand my situation, understand my health, understand my sickle cell, because every case is not the same. So you can't treat every patient the same. So Dr. Matthews just came in with a plan. And I feel like sometimes when you transition into that adulthood, I feel like, especially with your new doctor, I feel you should come in with a plan, especially for that patient, to kind of make them more comfortable in those situations too. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for answering that question, because we struggle with knowing how to do it. And Dr. George, I'm not that rare. Dr. Little is a rare bird. So I think all of you guys patients know, I'm a pediatrician, Alex is a pediatrician, and Sarah's a pediatrician. And the only person who is trained as an adult doctor is Dr. Jane Little on this panel. It is a sad situation that if you look at the adult provider pool for sickle cell disease, there's like, for every 20 of Dr. George and myself, there's like only one Dr. Little in the entire USA. So you see a lot of us pediatricians stepping into the adult side to try to fill that gap. So it's actually worse than you actually think, because there's not a whole lot. Like, if you have a heart attack, God forbid, I can't help you. I'm gonna have to call, hey, Jane, what do I do with an adult problem?
I don't know, Iffy.
I'm not a pediatrician, but it is a challenge. And I think, Nerva, Jerry, and Dominique speaking about it, talking about it, expanding to all audiences about your experience, whether it's Rare Disease Network or other people, making sure that you articulate all the things you just said in different forums. That's the way to make this thing better. And Nerva, you brought up a really, really good point that I wrote it down. You said the same way we do CME training for nurses and doctors, we need to have a training where we come and you guys teach us. We just sit and we listen to you guys. We listen to what you're telling us. You teach us how to have empathy, how to listen, how to speak to people, And it's not just sickle cell, but other chronic illnesses, so that we actually get to know how to do it. It's a lot easier to do it if you were taking care of the baby from birth with the mama and you kind of go up. But it's harder to do it if you all you do is take care of people, little by little, one person with lupus, one person with heart attack, one person with, it's a little bit harder to learn that skill. And I think that that's something that we need to learn. We need to learn how to do it for people in that age group of 18 to 30, where your life is changing. You're going through those stages. And you have a really good way of putting things, Nerva, the stages of life, because we know it in the book, but we don't know what it looks like in real life. And you just kind of explained that really nicely. So thank you so much for that. And I'm going to take this back to my folks, and we're going to have some conversation around that. This is a very, very good point. So thank you so much.
Jim Ekman is.
If I could add one quick point as well. So as doctors, we're trained to communicate in a certain way, to put facts together, to put information together in a certain way, because for us, it kind of makes sense to pull that information together, but it's not something that many patients are aware of how to do. And so when you go into the doctor's office, it can sometimes feel like what you're trying to communicate is not getting through to the doctor. And I've had this experience with my adult doctors, for example, and certainly my family has. I've posted a link on this chat about how to communicate with your doctor, how to prepare for a visit, how to have your information together, how to have your questions together, how to record information from the visit. And it's kind of unfair that patients have to do this, but in a sense, to maximize your visit, to get the best out of your visit, it sometimes is worthwhile to do some preparatory work and be aware of what can be helpful to you in getting the most out of your doctor. And so in a sense, it's in a sense called How to Be a Good Patient, which is a somewhat strange way to put this, but yes, there are some things you can do to really make your visit with your doctor most valuable to you. And this site lists some of the information that you can pull together and some of the things you can do to help with that.
I was hoping to make a comment too about, I think Ms. Nerva mentioned something about one of the physicians she had spoken to about their medical training. And I think that's a big focus too, at least for my path. It was similar. I mean, in our first couple of years of medical school, when you're learning basic science, I mean, sickle cell was covered like this much in our textbooks. And the same thing in my general rotations and my pediatric rotation. And it wasn't until I was getting close to finishing medical school where I think it was such a fortunate circumstance where I happened to come across somebody who was very passionate about sickle cell and taught me a lot about it and really formed my path into continuing to learn more and figure out more about sickle cell and end up getting to where I am now. So I think for me, especially with my role in resident education, I think one of the best things that we can do, and also our patients, is continue to educate the learners and bring more awareness at a learning stage, and just start forming those observations and their experiences really early. Because I don't know why I didn't train that long ago, and I trained in North Carolina. We have a large population of people with sickle cell here, and it wasn't represented well in our education. And so I think the more things like this, I am always so honored to be able to be a part of these panels, because like Dr. Iffy said, I feel like I come out learning way more than I've presented myself. I think it's great for me, and the more we can get our learners and really step really early into medical education with raising awareness about all these issues, not just related for sickle cell, but like transition of everything, communicating with your patients and experiences like that, I think it can be, it can have a large impact.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been extremely informative. We have more questions as we go on. Okay. So transitioning from pediatric to adult care can be stressful. How do you take care of your mental health? And that is posed to the patients.
I guess I'll go. Well, I'm someone who tries to, I guess, I'm an internal person. So if I'm really going through something, I have a really good poker face. I just don't show anything. At least I try not to. it's a very few people who can know truly, how I feel or something's wrong. It's like my mom and like my very close relatives, because they just look in my eyes and like, something's going wrong. Like, I can tell you ain't saying nothing, because I'm like, I'm good, I'm good, and my mom be like, no, you're not. What's going on? And I'm like, okay, here's what's going on. I mean, mental, you try your best to take care of, your mental and everything. Of course, if anyone who's spiritual or believe in God, you pray, try to get around positive people. You try to, try to clear out as much negative as possible. I mean, I know that's what I pretty much do, but I just, I just try my best to just focus on other things. So if I'm really hurting and I know I can't get the treatment that I need, or just life is happening, I put myself on the back burner and I'll just try to think about something else. Not saying it's right, not saying it's wrong, but I'll look at it as like, if I can't fix it right now, then I could just devote my attention to something else, and then, maybe it'll fix itself a little bit later. Like I said, I don't think that's probably too good, but that's just kind of my defense mechanism.
Mentally, I had to learn to. There was one time in my early 30s, I remember saying to myself in the hospital, crying, I wish I would have had cancer than deal with this sickle cell stuff. And that's how mental that I was so angry. I was angry, depressed. I was frustrated. I was over it. And for me to wish another sickness on me so somebody can listen to me was like the lowest for me. Like, it was just the lowest. Like, okay, you can't wish for something else just to get somebody to pay you some attention. And that to me told me that I need to go talk to somebody, because I'm so angry about this particular disease and the way I'm being treated, that I now wish that I had another disease that has a chronic ending to it too. But I probably would be heard, and they'll probably listen to me more with that disease than me having sickle cell.
Yeah.
So I had to go to a therapist in order, because I was sickle cell mad. I was mad that I had sickle cell and I was a patient. I was angry. Like, I carried that around. So like, even if I wasn't angry at my kids not listening to me, I was more angry about the doctor appointment that I had earlier that day. But then I would take it out on, she didn't pick up her shoe. So I really had to like go take a breath and figure a way out how to have mental peace and mental peace, mental sanity. I was like, it's okay not to be okay. And let me go talk to somebody. And I had to go find somebody to really be a listening ear for me. Because for somebody to say that, yeah, I got this chronic illness, but I want another chronic illness instead of this chronic illness, that's a problem. That's a problem to me. So I went and got treatment. I went and got help. I spoke to people. I had to go speak to therapists. I had to.
Thank you for putting that piece in, because a lot of the times with sickle cell, we don't look at our psychologists or our social workers as people who can help us through it. With sickle cell, a lot of the times you're learning this stuff at a young age. You know what to do when you go to a hospital. You know your doctors by the time you're able to speak. It's a lot of trauma that happens during the time, well, throughout the years of sickle cell. And it's very, very, very important to have a psychologist or a relationship with a psychologist or a social worker or a community based organization. And if they have someone on staff, I know we have a marvelous licensed clinical social worker on our staff, Miss Marsha Cullens. And I mean, it's so important to have those people around you, and especially on teams with the doctors. So now we have our bonus questions.
Before you
since
go
we're
to the
getting
bonus
close.
question,
Oh, sorry.
I want to hear, I don't know if Jerry's still on. Oh, he's not.
No.
But I also wanted to hear from the doctors about how do they handle the mental challenge of being the sickle cell provider? Because we want to make this real.
Yes.
Patients to see a therapist because having a chronic disease like sickle cell.
I'm sorry, are other people having trouble hearing that?
I didn't hear it either.
No, I didn't hear it.
You're frozen. I hate that.
So, how do you? I'm guessing her question was, how do you all have, like, how do you all implement therapists or therapy onto your team? And how do you talk to it about? How do you talk about therapy to your client, to your, excuse me, your patients with sickle cell? Do you implement that during transition, or do you implement it when they're younger? I'm guessing that's where she was going with the question. Oh, she's back. Okay.
Actually, I was asking the doctors what they do for their mental health being sickle cell providers.
I would say that I really eat healthily and I exercise all the time. But I also didn't train my cats to do anything on a trampoline, so I'm really not reliable. I just didn't have any fun facts, and I felt kind of bad about it. But anyway, I would say that in all seriousness, when you take care of people with illness, you sometimes screw up, and you sometimes get annoyed when you shouldn't. And for me, it has been very helpful to have colleagues that I really value and trust. And we also, if there's some situation that feels like there's something wrong, that we're not doing the right thing, I very seldom make those sort of, I feel like we're in a marathon. This is not, one day something goes wrong and your relationship with that patient is done. I feel like we have to be committed for the long haul. And one way to do that is that on our team, we have psychiatrists and social workers and very experienced APPs. And if there's something going on, we try to talk about it as a group. So you're not making a decision about a patient out of fatigue and annoyance and your own bad day. And for me, that's really been helpful. I really value that. And I think it helps when you say to the patients, I am recommending this thing for you, but I've talked to a number of people and we all think it's an okay thing to try. So I don't want you to feel like it's just, just me.
Yeah, that's tough, Iffy. I think medicine, a lot of physicians and medical providers can feel, stress and the tie from their job. I think that's a common thing we talk about in medicine, but I feel like with us in taking care of patients with sickle cell and their chronic illnesses, we get so tied to our patients too. And you want to be available to them all the time, like, when they're during nights, weekends, holidays, all the time. And so I think sometimes that is, hard for us too. But I think it's like Dr. Little said, for me, being surrounded by a fantastic team that our patients also trust, and they know that it's a team approach. I think then you don't have to carry that all yourself. And you can kind of share that amongst your team, and having our fantastic social worker and our psychologist, I mean, all of that helps. And I think Nerva said it's okay to not be okay. I think I tell that to myself and my family too. And I think just talking about it like this makes it real that we're not all okay all the time, and that's okay. I think just having that conversation among professionals and with our patients is important. And I think realizing when you've kind of gotten to that point of not being okay and finding someone to talk to, I think is hugely important. So I think my team and my family being a support too, kind of knowing that, it might be a Friday night, but when I get, a call from a patient, even having my children understand what I do and take care of sickle cell, and they know about it and they understand, and even hearing my kids say, oh, are you taking care of a kid who's in pain right now? Because they don't want that either. I think that supports me and kind of taking time away from my family because they know how important it is too. So I think just, your team and your family kind of helps me through that.
Thank you. Alex?
Yeah, it's a good question. So that's one of the reasons I mentioned my playing tennis, because I'm a pretty mild-mannered person in my professional life, but there are all the seething frustrations that come from being a physician and dealing with a complex disease that many health insurances don't get. And people think of tennis as a genteel sport, but it's like boxing without the gloves and the fists, right? It's a gladiatorial sport. So I vent my frustrations there on the court. I'm not the same person I am on.
I need to come watch you one day.
That's right. I smash my rackets on the floor and everything.
And doing that in the emergency room doesn't help.
That's right. It does not.
Having tried that,
I
I
get
can
security
say.
called on you. No, so I think caring for yourself as a health professional is very important. And in this COVID pandemic, we've all come to see how critical that can be. And I think it's something we can hopefully carry forward from this horrible past year. And I think my awareness of my own fragilities and my own weaknesses and my own pressure points carries over to hopefully to my care to my patients, and recognizing when they're in distress and trying to point out to them the symptoms that they're having that are beyond just the pain and the physical problems of sickle cell disease. Going through problems yourself can help you be more empathetic with your patients. And that's certainly been the case for me.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I want to make sure if he didn't get off scot-free.
So I agree with what Alex said. And so as a provider, learning how to take care of yourself is actually the most important thing that we can do. Unfortunately, many of us don't learn it for a very long time. So we're giving, and then we're running on empty for a couple of years, and then we crash, and then we end up in the ER telling Nerva that I'm God and it's my way or the highway, or we end up walking away from somebody who's screaming in pain, or we end up very callous and uncaring in how we approach patients because we are now no longer us. We are a shadow of who we really are. And we've moved away from our true north, which is what made us come into medicine in the first place. The second thing is that having your own medical issues or chronic illness or struggles that you go through is a really good leveler. I've been to the ER. I've been in healthcare. I've been treated like I'm a drug seeker. And I'm like, I came for an asthma attack. Like, why is that a bad thing? Are steroids now like opioids? Like, this is ridiculous. I've waited for hours in the ER waiting to get a nebulizer treatment. And I had to call a friend who's a doctor to come and save me because I think I was going to die there. And so that actually puts you in gives you some perspective. It's not the same as being in pain, but it makes you a little bit more understanding of what your patients go through when they tell you that they don't go until they're half dead. Because I don't want to go to the ER until I'm half out of breath and I can't breathe. But the other thing I want to say, and I'm an African-American woman, and most African-Americans don't access mental health care because there's a stigma attached to this. And very early in my career as a doctor with sickle cell disease, when I lost a teenager, and I got mad. So Nerva, you and I are like kindred spirits. I got so mad because I felt like I should have been able to do something. I should have been able to help. The system is sucky. Why did the patient die? That shouldn't have happened. And even when we talked about it in the team, we all agreed that there's something we could have done differently, but I was still mad. And I think that anger kind of carried on for a couple of years until I had a family member get really sick, and then it just kind of blew up. And then I knew I had to go see somebody. And so I tell my patients, like, I have my own mental health care plan. Okay, I have a mental health care plan to dealing with teenage children, for dealing with my African family, and also for dealing with my sickle cell career. And so it's okay to not be okay, as Sarah had mentioned. It's okay to acknowledge that we're not perfect, we're not God, we don't know everything, and that we need help ourselves as doctors. And I think my favorite, probably the most surprising phrase I use to my patient, I have no idea what's going on with you, but you know what, we're going to figure it out together, because it takes the pressure off of you that you are God. And I think part of what you see from us is we want to be the fixer of your problems, but we don't know how, and everything we know doesn't work. And so the defense we put up is, don't ask me any more questions. I know what I'm doing. It's going to have to work because it should work. But if it's not working, it must be somebody else's fault, not mine. And so I've gotten to where I acknowledge that I don't know, and I may not be able to fix everything, and it's okay, and we just keep looking and trying. But accessing mental health should be something that none of us is ashamed of or afraid of or hesitant to mention. I think it makes me a better doctor to know that if it gets to a point where things are bad, I can talk to a therapist, I can talk to a psychologist, I can talk to a social worker. And I have both professional and non-professional people. I have friends who are psychologists and social workers. And then I have my own therapist I go see on a regular basis to help me with dealing with all this tension of being an imperfect physician. And so, I think that to me is, I want you guys to also see us as humans too. And we don't know. We may not want to tell you we don't know, but half the time, we don't know, because all we got in school is that little paragraph that Sarah mentioned in the textbook. And every patient, I think it was Dominique that said, we're all different, or maybe Jerry. All patients are different. I may learn Jerry today, and I may see somebody else who's not like Jerry, and I'm like, okay, how do I do this? We're learning along with you to take care of you. And that's probably the most humbling part about being a sickle cell doctor. There is no universal roadmap for every single thing we see in this condition.
Thank you so much. That was excellent. I couldn't have asked for a better response from both the doctors and the patients. We do have a question that is from the chat. It says, how do you come to your decisions as a provider, understanding your patient's pain situation? Are there times that you doubt your patient? And if so, how do you resolve that challenge?
May I comment on this one? I think
Yes.
over time, I have learned that I never doubt that people are in pain. And I may, in some rare instances, want to treat it in a way that is different from what the patient expects, but I never doubt the pain.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I was actually typing a response to that question into the chat. What I would say is, I never doubt that something's going on with my patient that's making them feel ill. I never doubt that they're in pain. But there are times when I may not be sure that what the patient is expressing and what I think are going on are congruent. And then it's really a matter of sitting down and talking with the patient and trying to understand together what exactly is going on and what we can deal with. Sometimes it is a psychological pain of dealing with sickle cell disease that's causing a crisis. And if you don't deal with that, then you're not going to address the underlying pain. At other times, it's not sickle cell disease. Maybe it's an infection or something else. And so I think sitting down, listening to the patient, trusting what the patient says to you, teasing out the uncertainties and clarifying them, but never dismissing what the patient brings to you.
I absolutely agree with Alex. I think a lot of times something is causing the pain. The treatment of the pain is one aspect, but addressing the source of what's causing the pain is another aspect. And so I believe everybody who tells me they have pain, my question is going to be, what's causing it and what do I need to do about it? How do I fix it? I just had a patient who was in the hospital who had come in to see me and was having abdominal pain, and then that progressed to a full-blown sickle cell pain crisis. She was very constipated. We were focusing on the constipation. And after 3 days of nothing working, she finally showed up that she had a urinary tract infection that was a trigger for all of her pain. And it took another 3 days of IV antibiotics to fix it. And I've learned that you got to find the needle in the haystack. You got to find the source of the pain, because we were giving her mega doses of pain medications and none of it was working. And if we only assume that all of your pain is sickle cell pain, it's not going to always work. And I think that sometimes the pain should not be treated with opioids. Sometimes it should with the appropriate dose. Sometimes it should not, because that actually can make your pain worse. But it takes you sitting down with the patient and understanding what they're saying, doing all your investigation, keeping an open mind, because you just don't know. I mean, I've been told by my mother, my daughter had a stroke. And I'm like, girl, your child is fine. She kept saying that to if I think she had a stroke, I think she had a stroke. And then I said, you know what? My mother told me to always listen to my patients. I went and I did an MRI. And guess what? The girl had a stroke. And I was humbled. And so that was like in early in my career. So now I learned, look, it don't matter what the patient says, I'm going to believe it. I'm going to try to figure it out and not dismiss it, because sometimes things are not the way they seem on surface. What we know as doctors is only a little bit. And every patient, I think it was Jerry, every patient is different. This girl had a stroke. She looked fine, but her MRI clearly showed a stroke within the past 2 to 4 weeks. I was humbled. And so you got to believe the patient and figure out what is the best treatment. I think the conflict comes when people say you don't have pain, or they don't explain to you what they mean by you don't have pain may mean that you don't have pain that should be treated with IV narcotics. That doesn't mean that you don't have pain. If your joints are damaged, then giving you more and more IV narcotics are not going to fix the joint damage. You got to get your hip replaced. If you have irritable bowel syndrome, giving you IV Dilaudid is going to make your irritable bowel syndrome worse. And it feels just like a sickle cell crisis because it's irritable bowel. And so we have to learn how to communicate better about what we're thinking, what you're saying, and how we can meet some sort of understanding about the treatment plan. Pain is not only treated one way. There's many ways of treating pain. And if you use the right way, you're going to fix the pain. I think that's where we have to do a better job. And that's what we're learning to talk to the patients, doing that class that Nerva had mentioned, where we learn to communicate with our patients, to hear what they're saying and express ourselves to them in a way that they can understand what we're trying to convey is going to be very, very important.
Well said. Well said.
Can I have a question? What makes you doubt someone that comes into the ER with pain, and you guys say, like, well, not you guys, but like doctors in general, like, I don't believe that you have pain because you're sitting here having a whole conversation with your friend joking around. Like, what makes you doubt the pain? Like, doubt the person is having any kind of pain?
Yeah, so I've had that conversation with a lot of especially our residents and the people in the ED that have not had as much experience as we have. But like, I agree with the others. I don't doubt that. I think the misperception that sometimes happens is when other people see, people playing games on their phones, or in pediatrics, little kids trying to play games and trying to be kids. They think that means they're not hurting. And what I try to communicate to those people that are, might be seeing that patient in the ED, I try to tell them, I think that's how they're coping with their pain. Like, if they're sitting there not feeling good, they're going to try to be joking or try to be playing games or try to be listening to music or somehow taking their mind off their pain. Doesn't mean they're not hurting. They're trying distraction techniques. Like, when we're not feeling good, we try to do things that make us feel better, but it doesn't mean they're not hurting. And I think that's one of the biggest misperceptions, especially with people that aren't as experienced with sickle cell and treating, patients that come into the emergency room. But I try to emphasize, I think that's a coping mechanism. Again, we're trying to do things that make us feel better. I think laughing can make you feel better. It doesn't mean you're not hurting. It's trying to make yourself feel better.
Okay.
I also think, Nerva, is that they have never been in pain.
Yeah, yeah.
They have not been in pain, or if they were, they don't remember. They've never had a situation where they had to work through or live through their pain, or they look at you and you don't look a certain kind of way. There's a look to being ill, and that many sickle cell patients in the USA do not look sick. So then if you don't look, you're not bald, you're not dehydrated, you're not emaciated, your belly's not poked out, you're not looking like there's no blood dripping from your ears or your nose or your legs. So there's no dramatic look to you, or they have never had to or they've never connected the pain that they have with their, migraine or whatever that they go to work with. They've never connected that to what you guys experience. And the other thing is that they don't see, there's no like blood test that you can do. Like if
Right.
I have high blood pressure, I can do my blood pressure and I know it's high. If it's diabetes, I can do a sugar test and it shows high. And
Right.
easier for a doctor to believe a number or a positive test. But if they don't see a number, if they don't see a positive test, they have a harder time believing it because we kind of, to make life easy, we look at medicine as black or white. But those of us who do sickle cell disease know that you can have an x-ray of your joints that look normal, and you may have the worst pain in your hip that you've ever had. You may have an x-ray that looks like you should not be walking, you should be in a wheelchair, and you may have no pain. And
Right.
that is a conundrum of sickle cell. That's why it's complex. So what you see doesn't always translate into how the patient is experiencing the disease. That is a challenge.
And since we're talking about transition, the pain transitions too, I think.
Absolutely.
In pediatrics, and the pediatricians here can comment in a better way than I can, but we have noticed that younger people have a different kind of pain sometimes, where they'll have times with less pain that are pretty, prolonged, and then they'll have these horrible spikes. And I think ED providers, especially looking after young children, get used to that, of kids coming in horrible pain that's visible to everybody. But as you age, you get more chronic damage, and you can have chronic pain with spikes on top of that I think patients grow used to, and so they don't look like a child in pain. They're mature and they've adapted, and providers have not adapted similarly to seeing people who have chronic pain with acute spikes. And Alex, I'm sorry I cut you off.
No. I think all of you, I was just going to agree with all of you and say that this is probably partly a consequence of our training, that as doctors, we're trained to look for objective evidence of whatever we're treating so we can measure the response to our treatment. And the nature of sickle cell pain does not fit in well with that, because it's not, even though it is real pain, even though it has a physiological basis, there are no correlates that go with it, like a change in your blood counts or a change in your vital signs. And as Dr. Little said, in the transition setting, there is this change in the nature of pain from acute to more chronic pain. And I'm sure everyone can testify to this. Chronic pain is one of the most frustrating things to take care of as a physician, because we don't have a good understanding of it. We don't have good treatments for it. All the treatments we have limitations and side effects. And especially in the ED setting, in which you have to move things along quickly and make decisions quickly, if you don't have those objective findings and you think this is something chronic or long-term, it can be hard to deal with.
The other thing I'll just make a comment on is there are implicit biases associated with how we assess pain. If you bring 3 people, African American, Latina, and Caucasian, who all break their femur or they break their arm, and they show up in the emergency room, the African American is going to be the least likely to get pain medication. It will take longer time. Next is going to be the Latina, and then the person who will get attended faster with more pain medicines is going to be the Caucasian. And it doesn't matter if the provider is Black or white or Latina. And that's an unfortunate fact. That's data that's out there. And a lot of the work in diversity, inclusion, and equity is trying to change this implicit bias that we have in healthcare, because even us, we perceive, oh, little Joe may feel pain more than Jamal, which is kind of like a sad situation. And we're all supposed to take that implicit bias test as providers. And many of us have, I did my bias test, and I'm not far removed from everybody else. You have to make that conscious decision to unlearn the things you've been socialized with all your career, 40 years of being an adult or in medicine, 30 years, you have to unlearn that assessment that you were trained by your providers, your teachers, and all of that, how to assess and mitigate pain. People in labor, the Black lady's going to be less likely to get an epidural than the Latina versus the Caucasian person. So labor pain is labor pain. All of us have nerves that were formed the same way when God made our bodies. There's no racial preference in how you perceive pain, but there is a lot of racial preference in how we think people perceive pain and how we treat people who have pain. And that's just a very sad reality.
Right. And I think we have to, as both of you have posted in the chat, we have to remind ourselves that we have these biases and that having these biases does not make us bad people. It's ignoring those biases and not confronting them that makes us bad doctors. You know, I have my biases. Everyone has their biases. You just have to remind yourself that you have them, try to take them into account, and try to not let them influence your care. You know, walking into a patient room with a family that's well put together, well dressed, the parents are both there, as opposed to walking into a room with 3 screaming children, all dressed badly, smelling of tobacco smoke, you're going to have certain assumptions that jump into your mind, and I certainly have. What I've learned to do as I've moved along in my career is to take a pause and say, okay, these are not the kind of people I usually deal with. I have some prejudgments about them, and I should be aware of those and try to put them aside. And, you know, I think that's a strength to be able to try to catch those biases and be aware of them, not say I cannot have these biases because I'm a good person, and then try to be a good doctor regardless of those.
Thank you all so much. So I have 2 questions before we come to a close. And the first one I'm going to pose to the patients. Give me 1 second. If you could send a message to the future generation of sickle cell patients, what would your message say? Dominique?
Okay. All right. What I will say is, 1, make sure that you consider yourself first. And what I mean by that is, as much as you want to, you know, be normal and everything, you know, and, you know, conduct yourself as if you're normal, you still have to realize that other people, you know, they don't understand what you're going through. So you really have to be your best advocate. Always be on top of like your health. If you're feeling a certain way, be honest with it. I also would say that, you know, definitely, you know, get comfortable, you know, talking to your parents as well as your doctor, as much as possible. And it's okay that, you know, if you feel a certain way, or if you get treated for something and it doesn't work, being able to speak up about it, because, you know, especially while you have that, you know, I want to say crutch, but while you got the support system, like when you're, you know, a child, you got your mom, your parents, and your doctors. But it's really good to get that courage, starting off younger, so that when as you transition to your adult stage, you've already got, you know, that courage behind you, so then you can speak up and you know, and kind of, you know, can tell what's going on with you. But definitely consider yourself first, and just make sure that it's going to be okay. Take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, someone said it before, if you don't take care of yourself, then you won't be good for anyone else. So I would definitely just say consider yourself first, and it's going to be okay.
Thank you. Nerva?
I would say that for my future self, I would say, well, to future people, is that there will be a cure, hopefully by then. And it'll just be something that's a bump in the road. And if there isn't, the word normal, which I hate using, you are normal. There's like, you're just normal in your own way. There's nothing different about you. Just keep striving and pushing, and don't allow the sickness to live with you. Don't allow you to become your sickness. Allow the sickness to be part of your journey, but don't allow it to take over your journey.
I like that. I really do. That's real good. You know, if I don't mind, if I can comment, you really raised a good point. We are normal, and you know, we might have, you know, different challenges and faces, but at the end of the day, we're all human. We're all, you know, God's creation, so we are normal. And I think I need to change the way use that term as normal because, we really are. I like that. Yeah.
Thank you. I try, I try just a little bit. Just a little bit.
So I love that
The
too. I had
next
heard
question.
that from someone once and so a lot of patients or parents always want to know their kids' labs, and like what their hemoglobin is. And it's important that they know their baseline. And that's one thing I intentionally always never say is that the normal range for whatever, the normal range for the hemoglobin is this and yours is that. And I never say that. I say the reference range that the lab gives us is this and yours is this, but that's normal for you. So I love that too.
Thank you. The question for the doctors that I have is, what is your favorite thing about working with sickle cell patients? We'll start with Dr. Little.
I think I have not taken care of many people with as much courage and generosity, and I learn from them all the time. And I'm totally honored.
Dr. George.
That's all I have to say, surprisingly enough.
So I think, there were several things that drew me to working with people with sickle cell disease. One of which was that it was very clear in my training that this was a group of patients who were underserved. And to me, it's the gratitude I see from parents and patients to have someone who is willing and interested in working with them and not just doing this because they have to. So that it feels kind of, I don't know, selfish in a sense, but that gratitude makes me feel like I'm really doing something with my life and something with my training.
That's beautiful. Dr. Winter.
Gosh, this is hard. I have so many things that I love about what I get the privilege to do every day. For me, I think just one of the things is the resiliency and the strength, especially in the little patients that I get to take care of, and watching them grow into these wildly successful, strong, teenagers, and the challenges that they faced, and then the successes that they have. And also just being there through their struggles and helping to support them through the tough times too, and being able to be there for them. I think pediatrics is so unique, and in sickle cell, just being there through some of the most vulnerable times, and having these parents trust me with their children is so humbling. And I'm really honored to do that, and it's just I love it.
Thank you. Dr. Iffy.
It's just a lot of fun. I mean, it's hilarious. It's fun. I love the teenagers because they are just crazy, right? They come up with all kinds of things, and I look at them and I'm like, I used to be like you at one point in my life, So it reminds me of my youth. And then I have this cohort of older people, 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, and they are just absolutely delightful. And the one thing they have in common, they teach you stuff. Like, I have learned so much from my patients. I feel like every time I go to work, I'm going to school, and I'm getting smarter and smarter by just interacting with them. It's just a lot of fun. It's like George said, it's very gratifying. You see them go through stuff and you're like, wow, if they can do that, then who am I to complain? And you just learn from, they have little tidbits of wisdom that they give you in different ways that they don't even realize. They teach me medicine. They teach me how to be a better parent, how to be a better wife, how to be a better mom, how to be a better doctor. I feel like my life is never boring because I do sickle cell disease. And it's not just what you learn in the clinic, it's also what you learn outside. Like today, I mean, I've written down notes from what the patients have said. It fosters my creativity, it fosters my innovation. It's an amazing field to be in, and I love it. And if I were to do it all over again, I'll still do this. So thank you, Nerva, Jerry, and Dominique for and all of you guys, warriors, Justina, for giving us the privilege of working in this field, because it really is a privilege.
Yes. Thank
I
you
feel like
all.
we should just
So,
let you answer these questions, Iffy. You're so good. You're so good at it. You say all those things I wish I could remember to say.
I
So,
just
what you said.
love it. See, my mom was a sickle cell nurse. So I used to do this when I was like 7, 8 years old, hanging out with her on panels like this. It's kind of been all of my life. This is what I know. And it's a lot of fun. It has its sad moments. Don't get me wrong. There's some days, like I said, you get angry, you get upset, you cry. And I've been abused by some patients now. Don't get me. I had one guy steal my phone out of the clinic. But that's just human life, human beings. That's just life, you know? And then we laugh like, okay, really? He was trying to get back at me for something. And he took my phone. Like, how dumb was that, you know? But it's a lot of fun. It's amazing. And honestly, you guys are so unbelievably strong. When I see what my patients go through and I get a little hangnail or a headache, I'm like, if you stop whining.
I still complain.
well, I would like to thank you all for being a part of this panel. You guys made this come true. We've been working on it for over a year now, and it couldn't have gone better, honestly and truly. The conversation is needed, it is archived, so will always be there to go back and look at for anyone who needs to understand what sickle cell patients go through, what doctors go through, and how we are making this roadmap better. It may not be universal yet, but we can get there together. And I'm just so grateful to have Dominique, to have Nerva, to have Jerry, to have Dr. Iffy, Dr. George, Dr. Little, Dr. Leonard, you all, and Tara. You all are amazing people. And thank you so much, Miss Kathy, for allowing us to do this. There is one last thing that I would like to mention. Mr. Jerry Lee, he has a website that has T-shirts for sickle cell awareness. If you all saw, he was wearing it. Half of the proceeds, portion of the proceeds will go to the Sickle Cell Foundation, Piedmont Health Services, and Sickle Cell Agency. So please visit his website. Grateful. We will post it on the chat in here. And the work is amazing. And I'm just so happy to be a part of this and continuing this series of how we can fix the roadmap to sickle cell transition. Ms. Kathy, is there anything else you would like to say? Okay. Well, I would like to say thank you all. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for the audience. You woke up at 10 and you were here. So please, please, please share this. Make sure that everyone is able to see it. And thank you, and have a great World Sickle Cell Day, a great Juneteenth, everything. Enjoy your day, your weekend, and I'm going to give you guys your time back. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Justina.
Thank you, Justina. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to all of you for being real and raw.
Thank you. Hey, Nerva. Thank you so much, Dominique.
Thank you
Appreciate
so much.
it. You guys were awesome. Hey, Alex.
Peace out.
Go follow
Jane,
me.
bye. Sarah.
Bye, guys. Bye, 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 bye.